Personality. What makes us unique? ## introduction. Welcome to our comprehensive exploration of personality, one of psychology's most fascinating and complex topics. Have you ever wondered why some people are naturally outgoing while others prefer solitude? Why certain individuals thrive under pressure while others crumble? Why do some people see the glass as half full while others focus on what's missing? The answer lies in the intricate and beautiful tapestry of human personality. Personality is far more than just being shy or outgoing, organized or messy. It's the unique combination of thoughts, emotions, behaviors, attitudes, and characteristics that make each person distinct. Think of it as a psychological fingerprint. No two people share exactly the same pattern. Even identical twins raised in the same household develop their own unique personalities. But what exactly shapes this fundamental aspect of who we are? How do we become the people we are today? And perhaps most importantly, can we change aspects of our personality that we don't like? Today, we'll embark on a comprehensive journey through the major theories, concepts, and research findings that help us understand what makes us uniquely human. From the ancient Greeks who first categorized temperaments to modern neuroscientists studying the brain basis of personality, humans have long been fascinated by individual differences. We'll explore how personality develops from infancy through old age, examine the biological and environmental factors that shape us, and discover practical ways to apply personality psychology in our daily lives. ## the Big Five personality traits, the gold standard. Let's begin with the most widely accepted and researched model in modern psychology, the Big Five personality traits, also known as the five-factor model or ocean model. This framework emerged from decades of research and suggests that human personality can be understood through five broad, fundamental dimensions that appear consistently across cultures, languages, and age groups. ## openness to experience, the gateway to wonder. Openness to experience is perhaps the most intellectually oriented of the Big Five traits. People high in openness are naturally curious, creative, and willing to try new things. They're the individuals who appreciate art galleries and poetry, enjoy philosophical discussions, and embrace novel experiences with enthusiasm. They tend to have active imaginations, enjoy fantasy and daydreaming, and are often drawn to unconventional ideas and alternative lifestyles. Think of that friend who's always suggesting new restaurants from different cultures, or the colleague who comes up with innovative solutions that nobody else considered. These are likely high-openness individuals. They're intellectual risk-takers who question traditional ways of doing things and are comfortable with ambiguity and complexity. On the other end of the spectrum, people low in openness prefer familiarity, tradition, and conventional approaches. They're practical and down-to-earth, preferring tried-and-true methods over experimental ones. They might find abstract art confusing and prefer clear, straightforward communication. This isn't a limitation. Their preference for stability and proven methods makes them excellent at maintaining systems and following established procedures. Research has shown that openness tends to predict academic and artistic achievement, liberal political attitudes, and willingness to try new foods, travel to unfamiliar places, and engage with diverse groups of people. However, extremely high openness can sometimes lead to difficulty making decisions due to seeing too many possibilities or problems with follow-through on creative projects. ## conscientiousness, the foundation of achievement. Conscientiousness is arguably the most powerful predictor of life success across various domains. Highly conscientious people are organized, disciplined, dutiful, and goal-oriented. They're the individuals who keep detailed planners, arrive early to appointments, and follow through on their commitments without reminding. These are the people who make excellent project managers, reliable team members, and trustworthy friends. They set clear goals and work systematically toward achieving them. They're good at delaying gratification, resisting temptations that might derail their long-term objectives, and maintaining routines that support their success. Conscientiousness involves several subfacets: self-discipline, orderliness, dutifulness, achievement striving, self-efficacy, and deliberation. Someone might be highly organized but struggle with self-discipline, or be extremely dutiful but lack personal ambition. These nuances make personality beautifully complex. On the lower end of conscientiousness, we find individuals who are more spontaneous, flexible, and comfortable with messiness and unpredictability. They might struggle with deadlines and organization, but they're often more adaptable to changing circumstances and less stressed by disorder. They can be creative problem solvers who think outside conventional structures. Research consistently shows that conscientiousness predicts academic performance, job performance, longevity, and even relationship satisfaction. However, extremely high conscientiousness can sometimes lead to rigidity, perfectionism, and difficulty relaxing or having fun. #extroversion, the social energy dimension. Extroversion is perhaps the most familiar and easily recognizable personality trait, but it's more nuanced than simply being talkative or quiet. Extroverts gain energy from social interaction and external stimulation. They speak their minds readily, enjoy being the center of attention, and feel comfortable in groups. They're typically enthusiastic, assertive, and active. But extroversion encompasses several components: sociability, assertiveness, activity level, excitement seeking, positive emotions, and warmth. You might meet someone who's highly sociable but not particularly assertive, or someone who's very active and excitement seeking but not especially warm or emotionally expressive. Extroverts tend to be optimistic and experience positive emotions more frequently and intensely. They're often natural leaders, networkers, and public speakers. They think out loud, process information externally, and are energized by variety and stimulation. In meetings, extroverts are likely to speak up quickly and contribute ideas spontaneously. Introverts, scoring low on extroversion, find energy and restoration in solitude and quiet activities. They prefer processing information internally before speaking, often enjoy deeper one-on-one conversations over large group discussions, and typically have fewer but closer friendships. This doesn't mean they're antisocial or shy. Many introverts are socially skilled and enjoy people. They simply prefer smaller doses of social interaction. Research shows that extroverts tend to be happier on average, partly because they experience more positive emotions and partly because many societies are structured to reward extrovert behavior. However, introverts often show greater persistence, better listening skills, and superior performance in tasks requiring sustained concentration. #agreeableness, the interpersonal harmony factor. Agreeableness reflects how we interact with others and our general attitude toward people. Highly agreeable individuals are compassionate, trusting, cooperative, and modest. They assume good intentions in others, avoid conflict when possible, and are quick to help those in need. They're team players who prioritize group harmony over personal advancement. Agreeableness includes trust, altruism, compliance, modesty, tender-mindedness, and straightforwardness. Someone might be highly trusting and altruistic but struggle with being too compliant, or be very modest and tender-hearted, but sometimes too straightforward in their communication. People high in agreeableness make excellent counselors, teachers, and caregivers. They're skilled at reading others' emotions, providing support during difficult times, and mediating conflicts. They tend to have stable, long-lasting relationships and are generally well-liked by others. Those lower in agreeableness are more competitive, skeptical, and willing to prioritize their own interests. They're more likely to challenge others, question motives, and stand firm in negotiations. While this might sound negative, these traits can be valuable in leadership roles, legal professions, and situations requiring tough decisions. Research indicates that very high agreeableness can sometimes be detrimental, leading to being taken advantage of or difficulty making hard but necessary decisions. The most effective leaders often score moderate on agreeableness, high enough to inspire loyalty, but low enough to make tough choices when needed. Neuroticism. The emotional stability spectrum. Neuroticism measures emotional stability and the tendency to experience negative emotions. People high in neuroticism are more prone to anxiety, depression, mood swings, and emotional reactivity. They may worry excessively, feel overwhelmed by stress, and struggle to bounce back from setbacks. This trait includes anxiety, hostility, depression, self-consciousness, impulsiveness, and vulnerability to stress. Someone might be highly anxious but not particularly hostile, or prone to depression but not especially self-conscious. These different facets can manifest in various ways. However, it's crucial to understand that neuroticism isn't entirely negative. Moderate levels can serve important functions. Neurotic individuals are often more aware of potential problems, more motivated to avoid risks, and more sensitive to their environment. They may be excellent at quality control, safety planning, and anticipating difficulties. People low in neuroticism are emotionally stable, calm under pressure, and resilient in the face of adversity. They recover quickly from disappointments, maintain optimism during difficult times, and rarely experience intense negative emotions. They're often seen as unflappable and reliable during crises. The key insight is that all personality traits exist for evolutionary reasons and can be adaptive in different contexts. High neuroticism might have helped our ancestors survive by being vigilant for threats, while low neuroticism helped others take necessary risks and lead groups through challenges. The dynamic interaction of traits. What makes personality truly fascinating is how these 5 dimensions interact. Someone might be high in openness and neuroticism, a combination that could produce an anxious artist or a worried intellectual. Another person might be high in conscientiousness and agreeableness, perhaps a dedicated teacher or reliable friend who always follows through on commitments while caring deeply about others. These interactions create the rich diversity of human personality. You might be high in openness and conscientiousness but moderate in the other traits, creating a unique profile of someone who's creative and disciplined, but neither extremely social nor particularly agreeable. Or you might be low in neuroticism and high in extroversion. Perhaps someone who's outgoing and emotionally stable, the life of the party who never seems to get stressed. Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, a different perspective. While the Big Five focuses on dimensional traits that exist on continuums, the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator takes a categorical approach, identifying 16 distinct personality types based on 4 key dichotomous preferences. Developed by Catherine Briggs and her daughter Isabel Briggs Myers, this system was inspired by Carl Jung's psychological theories. The 4 fundamental preferences. Extroversion versus introversion. In the Myers-Briggs system goes beyond simple sociability. It's fundamentally about where you direct your energy and attention, and how you recharge. Extroverts focus their energy on the external world of people, activities, and things. They're energized by interaction and tend to act first, then reflect. They like variety and action, and they're comfortable being the center of attention. Introverts direct their energy inward to the world of ideas, impressions, and thoughts. They prefer to reflect first, then act. They're energized by spending time alone or with close friends, and they like depth over breadth in their activities and relationships. This isn't about being shy or antisocial. It's about energy flow and focus. Sensing versus intuition. Describes how you prefer to take in information and what you naturally notice. Sensors focus on concrete information that comes through their five senses. They prefer facts, details, and practical applications. They trust experience over theory and like to build understanding step by step. They're often described as realistic and practical. Intuitives focus on patterns, possibilities, and the big picture. They're drawn to abstract concepts, future potential, and theoretical possibilities. They trust hunches and inspiration, often leaping to conclusions without working through all the steps. They're often described as imaginative and innovative. Thinking versus feeling reflects how you prefer to make decisions and what you consider most important when weighing options. Thinkers prioritize logical analysis, objective criteria, and fairness. They step back emotionally to evaluate situations rationally, considering principles and consequences. They value competence and fairness. Feelers consider personal values, the impact on people, and what matters most to them and others. They make decisions based on personal and interpersonal considerations, seeking harmony and considering how decisions affect people. They value authenticity and compassion. Judging versus perceiving describes your preferred lifestyle and how you like to organize your outer world. Judgers like structure, closure, and having things settled. They prefer planned, organized approaches to life and like to have decisions made. They work steadily toward deadlines and like to finish projects before starting new ones. Perceivers value flexibility, adaptability, and keeping options open. They prefer spontaneous, flexible approaches to life and like to keep decisions open as long as possible. They work in bursts of energy and like to have multiple projects going simultaneously. Hashtag the 16 types and their characteristics. These 4 preferences combine in various ways to create 16 distinct types, each with its own strengths, challenges, and natural inclinations. For example, in ENFJ, extrovert, intuitive, feeling, judging, is often called the teacher or the protagonist. These individuals are charismatic leaders who inspire others with their vision. They're excellent at understanding people's motivations and helping them reach their potential. An ISTP, introverted, sensing, thinking, perceiving, known as the craftsperson or the virtuoso, is practical and action-oriented. They're excellent troubleshooters who prefer hands-on problem-solving and often have excellent mechanical or technical skills. INFP, types introverted, intuitive, feeling, perceiving, called the mediator or the idealist, are driven by their values and seek meaning in everything they do. They're creative, empathetic, and often drawn to helping professions or artistic pursuits. ENTJ, individuals, extrovert, intuitive, thinking, judging, known as the commander or the executive, are natural leaders who excel at organizing people and resources to achieve goals. They're strategic thinkers who aren't afraid to make tough decisions. Hashtag strengths and limitations of type theory. The Myers-Briggs system has been incredibly popular, used by millions of people worldwide for career counseling, team building, and personal development. Many people find it helpful for understanding themselves and improving communication with others. It can explain why certain tasks feel natural while others feel draining, why some work environments are energizing while others are exhausting. However, the system has significant limitations that users should understand. The scientific evidence for distinct types is limited. Most people show continuous distributions on these dimensions rather than clear categories. People often score near the middle on some dimensions, making type assignment somewhat arbitrary. Additionally, many people identify with descriptions of multiple types, suggesting the categories may be too rigid. Despite these limitations, the Myers-Briggs system remains valuable as a starting point for self-reflection and understanding others. The key is to use it as a framework for thinking about preferences rather than a definitive categorization system. Hashtag Eysenck's three-factor theory, a biological approach. Hans Eysenck, a German-British psychologist, proposed a simpler model focusing on three major dimensions that he believed had strong biological foundations. His approach was more empirically rigorous than earlier theories, using factor analysis to identify the most fundamental personality dimensions. #extroversion introversion. The stimulation preference. Eysenck's extroversion introversion dimension is similar to the Big Five extroversion, but places greater emphasis on stimulation seeking and physiological arousal. According to Eysenck's theory, extroverts have naturally lower baseline arousal levels, which means they seek external stimulation to reach their optimal performance level. They crave excitement, enjoy parties and social gatherings, take risks more readily, and are generally more impulsive. Introverts, conversely, have higher baseline arousal levels and therefore prefer calmer, less stimulating environments. They perform better in quiet settings, prefer routine over variety, and are more cautious in their approach to new situations. This isn't about being unsociable, it's about optimal stimulation levels. This theory helps explain why extroverts might feel restless and bored in quiet environments while introverts might feel overwhelmed in busy, noisy settings. It also predicts that introverts might perform better on tasks requiring sustained attention, while extroverts might excel in dynamic, interactive situations. #neuroticism stability. The emotional reactivity dimension. Eysenck's neuroticism versus emotional stability dimension captures individual differences in emotional reactivity and stress response. People high in neuroticism have more reactive emotional systems. They experience emotions more intensely and have difficulty returning to emotional baseline after stress. This isn't simply about being negative or pessimistic. Neurotic individuals might experience positive emotions intensely too, but they're particularly prone to anxiety, worry, guilt, and mood swings. They might lie awake at night replaying conversations or worry excessively about future events. Emotionally stable individuals have less reactive emotional systems. They remain calm under pressure, recover quickly from setbacks, and maintain relatively stable moods regardless of external circumstances. They're often seen as unflappable and reliable during crises. Eysenck believed this dimension had strong genetic components and was related to the functioning of the limbic system in the brain. Modern neuroscience has largely supported this view, showing that people high in neuroticism tend to have more reactive amygdalas and different patterns of brain connectivity. #psychoticism. The unconventional dimension. Eysenck's third dimension, psychoticism, is unique to his model and often misunderstood due to its clinical-sounding name. This dimension reflects traits like nonconformity, tough-mindedness, and independence. People high in psychoticism tend to be less concerned with social rules and conventions, more aggressive and assertive, less empathetic in traditional ways, more creative and original in their thinking, less influenced by social pressure, more willing to challenge authority. While the name psychoticism might sound pathological, moderate levels can be quite adaptive. Many successful entrepreneurs, artists, and innovators score moderately high on this dimension. They're willing to break rules, challenge conventional thinking, and pursue their vision despite social pressure. However, extremely high levels of psychoticism can indeed be problematic, potentially leading to antisocial behavior, lack of empathy, and difficulty maintaining relationships. Like all personality traits, psychoticism exists on a continuum, and moderate levels can be beneficial while extremes can be problematic. #the biological basis of personality. Eysenck was a pioneer in proposing biological bases for personality differences. He suggested that extroversion was related to arousal levels in the brain's reticular activating system, neuroticism to emotional reactivity in the limbic system, and psychoticism to hormonal influences, particularly testosterone. Modern research has supported many of Eysenck's predictions. Brain imaging studies show that extroverts and introverts have different patterns of brain activation, with extroverts showing more activity in the anterior cingulate and temporal lobes, while introverts show more activity in the prefrontal cortex. Similarly, people high in neuroticism show greater amygdala reactivity to emotional stimuli. ## locus of control, where power resides. Julian Rotter's concept of locus of control represents one of psychology's most influential ideas about how people understand causation in their lives. This concept profoundly impacts how we navigate challenges, pursue goals, and interpret our experiences. ## internal locus of control. The architects of destiny, people with an internal locus of control, fundamentally believe they are the primary architects of their own lives. They think success and failure result primarily from their own actions, decisions, skills, and efforts. When something positive happens, they credit their hard work, intelligence, or good decision-making. When things go wrong, they examine their own behavior and choices to understand what went wrong and how to improve. This mindset creates a powerful psychological advantage. Internal locus individuals are more likely to take initiative in improving their situations, persist longer when facing obstacles, develop better problem-solving skills, experience higher levels of motivation and achievement, report better mental health and life satisfaction, take better care of their physical health, develop stronger leadership skills. For example, if an internal locus student receives a poor grade, they're likely to think, "I didn't study enough," or "I need to change my study strategy." This attribution leads to actionable solutions and improved future performance. However, an extremely internal locus can sometimes be problematic. These individuals might blame themselves for circumstances truly beyond their control, leading to unnecessary guilt and self-criticism. They might also underestimate the role of luck, privilege, or systemic factors in their success. ## external locus of control. When forces beyond us rule, those with an external locus of control believe that outcomes in their lives are primarily determined by forces outside their control: luck, fate, powerful others, or circumstances. They might attribute success to being in the right place at the right time, having helpful connections, or favorable circumstances. When things go wrong, they point to bad luck, unfair treatment, or impossible circumstances. This mindset can provide psychological protection from self-blame during failures, but it also creates significant limitations. Reduced motivation to take action when facing problems, lower persistence when encountering obstacles, increased susceptibility to learned helplessness, higher rates of anxiety and depression, less development of personal skills and competencies, greater dependence on others for solutions. Using the same example, an external locus student who receives a poor grade might think, "The teacher doesn't like me," or "The test was unfair," or "I'm just not a good test taker." These attributions don't lead to actionable improvement strategies. However, moderate external locus isn't entirely negative. These individuals might be more understanding of others' failures, less likely to be overly critical, and more aware of systemic inequalities and environmental factors that genuinely do influence outcomes. ## the development and malleability of locus of control. Locus of control typically develops through childhood experiences. Children who grow up in predictable environments where their actions consistently lead to expected outcomes tend to develop internal locus. Those who experience chaotic, unpredictable environments where their efforts don't reliably produce results may develop external locus. Parenting style plays a crucial role. Parents who provide consistent consequences, encourage problem solving, and help children see connections between actions and outcomes foster internal locus. Parents who are inconsistent, solve all problems for their children, or expose them to uncontrollable stress may inadvertently foster external locus. Cultural factors also matter significantly. Individualistic cultures tend to foster internal locus, while collectivistic cultures might encourage more external attributions that acknowledge the role of family, community, and circumstances. The good news is that locus of control can change throughout life. Therapy, coaching, successful experiences, and conscious effort can help shift toward a more internal orientation when appropriate. Cognitive behavioral therapy, in particular, focuses on helping people recognize how their thoughts and behaviors influence outcomes. #situational specificity. It's important to recognize that locus of control can vary across different life domains. You might feel highly in control of your career success, but powerless over your health outcomes. Someone might believe they control their academic performance, but feel helpless about their social relationships. This situational specificity means that developing a more internal locus in one area can sometimes generalize to other areas, but it often requires specific work in each domain. Building efficacy experiences, situations where you take action and see positive results, is key to developing internal locus where it's beneficial. #self-esteem. The foundation of self-worth. Self-esteem, how we evaluate our overall worth as human beings, is one of psychology's most studied and misunderstood concepts. It significantly influences our thoughts, emotions, behaviors, and life outcomes, yet the relationship is more complex than simple. High self-esteem is good, low self-esteem is bad. #understanding healthy self-esteem. Healthy self-esteem involves a balanced, realistic view of yourself that includes both strengths and weaknesses. People with healthy self-esteem accept themselves as fundamentally worthwhile, while acknowledging areas for growth. Don't base their self-worth entirely on external achievements or others' opinions. Can handle criticism without devastating emotional reactions. Take appropriate responsibility for their actions without excessive self-blame. Set realistic goals and expectations for themselves. Maintain self-compassion during difficult times. Can celebrate their successes without becoming arrogant. This type of self-esteem is stable because it's not dependent on constant external validation or perfect performance. It provides a secure foundation for taking risks, learning from failures, and building meaningful relationships. #the challenges of low self-esteem. People with low self-esteem tend to view themselves harshly and doubt their fundamental worth. This creates a cascade of problems: negative self-talk, constant internal criticism and self-doubt, perfectionism, setting impossibly high standards to prove their worth, people-pleasing, desperate need for approval from others, avoidance, staying away from challenges that might reveal inadequacies, self-sabotage, unconsciously undermining their own success, relationship difficulties, difficulty believing they deserve love and respect, decision paralysis, fear of making wrong choices leads to avoiding decisions. Low self-esteem often develops from early experiences of criticism, neglect, abuse, or constant comparison to others. Childhood messages like, "You're not good enough," or "You can't do anything right" can become internalized beliefs that persist into adulthood. However, it's crucial to understand that low self-esteem serves psychological functions. It might protect against disappointment. If I expect little, I won't be hurt. Reduce social rejection risk. If I'm self-deprecating, others might be less critical. Or maintain familiar patterns. This is how I've always seen myself. The dark side of high self-esteem. While healthy self-esteem is beneficial, inflated or defensive high self-esteem can create its own problems. Narcissistic tendencies, believing you're superior to others, inability to learn, refusing to acknowledge mistakes or weaknesses, relationship problems, demanding constant admiration and validation, aggression, reacting angrily when self-image is threatened, unrealistic expectations, setting goals based on grandiose self-perception, blame externalization, attributing all failures to external factors. This type of high self-esteem is often fragile, requiring constant maintenance through achievements, comparisons, or others' validation. It's more accurately described as defensive self-protection rather than genuine self-acceptance. Building genuine self-esteem. Developing healthy self-esteem is a gradual process that involves several key components. Self-awareness comes first, honestly examining your strengths, weaknesses, values, and patterns without harsh judgment. This includes recognizing your internal critic and learning to question its accuracy. Self-compassion involves treating yourself with the same kindness you'd show a good friend. This means acknowledging difficulties without self-attack and recognizing that imperfection is part of the human experience. Competence building, through taking on appropriate challenges, developing skills, and achieving meaningful goals. Success experiences provide evidence of capability that can counter negative self-beliefs. Value clarification helps you define what truly matters to you, independent of others' expectations. Living according to your authentic values builds self-respect and integrity. Relationship skills development improves your connections with others, which can provide positive feedback and support for healthy self-regard. Therapeutic work might be necessary to address deep-seated negative beliefs, traumatic experiences, or persistent patterns of self-criticism. Self-esteem across the lifespan. Self-esteem tends to follow predictable patterns across life. It's generally high in young childhood, drops during adolescence, particularly for girls, rises through young adulthood, peaks in middle age, and often declines in later life. These patterns reflect developmental challenges. Adolescents face identity formation and social comparison pressures. Young adults gain independence and competence. Middle-aged adults often achieve career and relationship stability. Older adults may face health declines and social losses. Understanding these patterns can help normalize experiences and guide interventions. A teenager's self-doubt might be developmentally appropriate, while an adult's persistent self-criticism might warrant more concern. Narcissism, the spectrum of self-love. Narcissism is perhaps one of the most misunderstood concepts in personality psychology, often confused with simple arrogance or self-confidence. In reality, narcissism exists on a complex spectrum from healthy self-regard to pathological self-obsession. Healthy narcissism, the foundation of self-worth. Healthy narcissism is not only normal but essential for psychological well-being and success. It includes appropriate self-love, caring for yourself and recognizing your inherent worth, realistic self-confidence, believing in your abilities based on genuine competence, self-advocacy, speaking up for your needs and standing up for yourself, ambition, pursuing meaningful goals and working toward achievement, resilience, maintaining self-worth despite setbacks and criticism, boundaries, protecting yourself from harmful people and situations. People with healthy narcissism can compete without destroying others, celebrate their successes without diminishing others' achievements, and maintain self-respect while showing genuine empathy for others. They can handle criticism, learn from feedback, and admit mistakes without their self-worth crumbling. This type of narcissism is adaptive because it motivates self-care, achievement, and healthy relationship boundaries. Without some degree of self-love, people become doormats, fail to pursue their potential, and may develop depression or anxiety. Pathological narcissism. When self-love becomes self-obsession. Pathological narcissism, however, involves a grandiose, unrealistic self-perception coupled with an inability to empathize genuinely with others. The key characteristics include grandiose self-perception, believing they're fundamentally superior to others, special, or deserving of exceptional treatment. They might claim to be geniuses, extraordinarily talented, or destined for greatness despite limited evidence. Constant need for admiration, requiring ongoing validation, praise, and attention from others. They become upset when they're not the center of attention and may create drama or emergencies to regain focus. Lack of empathy, difficulty understanding or caring about others' feelings, needs, or perspectives. They might intellectually understand others' emotions, but lack genuine emotional connection or concern. Exploitation of relationships, using others for their own benefit without regard for the other person's well-being. They see relationships as transactions where others exist to meet their needs. Entitlement, expecting special treatment, privileges, or exceptions to rules. They believe normal social expectations don't apply to them. Inability to handle criticism, reacting with rage, denial, or blame when their self-image is threatened. They can't tolerate being wrong or imperfect. Envy and projection, either envying others' success or believing others are envious of them. They have difficulty celebrating others' achievements. ### The development of narcissistic traits. Narcissistic traits typically develop from complex interactions between temperament and early experiences. Some contributing factors include excessive praise without substance. Children who receive constant praise for ordinary achievements or traits beyond their control, "You're the most beautiful/smartest child ever," might develop unrealistic self-perceptions. Conditional love. When parents' affection depends on the child's performance, achievements, or reflection of the parent's image, children might develop a false self focused on maintaining that conditional approval. Emotional neglect. Paradoxically, children who don't receive adequate emotional attention might develop narcissistic traits as a way to meet their unmet needs for validation and admiration. Trauma and abuse. Some narcissistic traits develop as protective mechanisms against overwhelming feelings of vulnerability, shame, or powerlessness. Cultural factors. Societies that heavily emphasize individual achievement, competition, and external success might foster narcissistic traits in susceptible individuals. ### The hidden vulnerability. What many people don't understand about pathological narcissism is that it often covers deep-seated feelings of inadequacy, shame, and vulnerability. The grandiose presentation is frequently a defense against underlying feelings of worthlessness. This explains why narcissistic individuals react so strongly to criticism or perceived slights. Their defensive self-image is fragile and requires constant maintenance. Any threat to this false self triggers intense emotional reactions because it threatens to expose the vulnerable, wounded self underneath. This doesn't excuse harmful narcissistic behavior, but it helps explain why changing these patterns is so difficult. The narcissistic defenses serve important psychological functions for the individual, even as they damage relationships and limit genuine connection. ### Narcissism in the digital age. Modern technology and social media have created new platforms for narcissistic behavior and may be contributing to increased narcissistic traits in society. Social media provides unlimited opportunities for self-promotion and image management, collecting admiration through likes, comments, and followers, comparing oneself to others and maintaining superiority feelings, creating grandiose online personas, seeking constant validation and attention. However, it's important not to confuse normal social media use or even moderate self-promotion with true narcissism. Many people use these platforms in healthy ways to connect with others, share meaningful experiences, and build genuine communities. The key difference is whether the behavior serves authentic connection and balanced self-expression, or primarily feeds an insatiable need for admiration and validation, while disregarding others' needs and feelings. ### recovery and change. While personality disorders are generally stable, people with narcissistic traits can change with sustained effort, appropriate therapy, and strong motivation. The process typically involves developing genuine empathy through perspective-taking exercises and emotional awareness training, building a more realistic self-concept based on authentic strengths and acknowledged weaknesses, learning to tolerate criticism and imperfection without defensive reactions, addressing underlying shame and vulnerability in therapy, practicing genuine interest in others and their experiences, building relationships based on mutual respect rather than exploitation. However, change requires acknowledging the problems with narcissistic behavior, which is often the biggest obstacle since narcissistic individuals typically don't see their behavior as problematic. ##perfectionism, the double-edged sword. Perfectionism is one of the most complex personality traits, capable of driving remarkable achievements while simultaneously creating intense suffering. Understanding its different forms is crucial for harnessing its benefits while avoiding its pitfalls. #Adaptive perfectionism. Excellence in pursuit. Adaptive perfectionism involves setting high standards that are challenging but achievable, and finding satisfaction in excellent work without requiring absolute perfection. People with adaptive perfectionism set high but realistic goals based on their capabilities and circumstances. Work diligently toward excellence while accepting that perfection isn't always possible. Learn from mistakes without excessive self-criticism. Find satisfaction and pride in their accomplishments. Can adjust standards when circumstances change. Maintain perspective about what truly matters. Use their high standards to motivate continuous improvement. This type of perfectionism is associated with higher achievement, better performance, increased motivation, and greater life satisfaction. Adaptive perfectionists might be excellent surgeons, engineers, artists, or athletes who consistently produce high-quality work while maintaining their mental health and relationships. For example, an adaptive perfectionist musician might practice diligently, strive for flawless performances, and feel disappointed by mistakes, but they can still enjoy performing, learn from errors, and maintain perspective about the role of